And welcome to everybody. My name's Matthew.
I'm David, and as hosts, we're here to welcome all of you in this room at Peace Awareness Labyrinth and Gardens and everyone joining us online. We have two hand-picked excerpts from John Roger, the founder of the movement of spiritual inner awareness, to continue to open this sweet space. Here we go.
The convergence of spirit inside of you and the alignment of your energies to God are vitally, vitally important things. We do it through harmonic vibrations. We do it through visualization. We do it through seeing the light. We do it through seeing the beauty, the peace. We do it through living the best way we can. And we live it mostly by forgiving every action we've done, even this last one. Because if it's right, it's okay, forgive it and forget it. And if it's wrong, it better be forgiven and forgotten. And it's just this next one, this next one. The value of history and the value of going through the temples, the pyramid, the tombs, is not to do historical, leave the present and go there. But it's more the factor of a time traveler, where we enter into time and we just move time into the ancient pattern and let it reveal itself. You still stay present in the historical perspective. The perception is always in the eye of the beholder. But when we lose track of the fantasy in the symbols and all these tombs, when we lose track of the illusions that are in there, we lose track of the super sense world, the invisible world, because we are reducing everything down to a materialistic stage, and we do not look for what was behind that produced the material. But to understand God, the spirit behind all of that, we have to open the mind to such tremendous possibilities. I kept bringing it back here and now, here and now, here and now. We looked in the temples asleep. I said, when they did then, that's like right now. So your history no longer became history, but it became a living presence. That you're in a long line that's been going on for a long time. And it doesn't matter who the travelers were back then. It matters who are you in relationship with the traveler inside of you. That's what matters. And how close are you waking to the fullness of that? That's what matters. Very special.
Wow. So I have the honor of getting to introduce to you John Morton. I was just thinking that MSIA is like a pageant. It's like a rich pageant where every one of us has a crucial role to play. We got some court jesters, quite a few of them actually, and then we got just a role of every type, and I think for all of us, me included, John is the star, and he's the star for a reason, because he holds the consciousness of the traveler with such humility and such grace and such forbearance and such humor. So thanks for being my star, John, and I want to welcome you.
There. Hello. Looking around the room, looking into that eye that opens up lots of places. So we heard from France, New Zealand, Panama, Chile, around the United States, Colombia, Mexico, Australia, and Nigeria. So if you're, yes, I heard that applause. So we do like hearing from you in some way, indicating where you're tuning in from. That's kind of fun around the globe, etc. And I want to appreciate whatever generation we have here tonight. Thank you for your devotion, dedication to show up on Tuesday nights and take that shift, so that we have David and Matt, as well as others who participate in making the teachings available. That's a job that we have here at the headquarters. That's where we're located tonight. Maybe it's more correct to say the heart quarters, but I think that's something that we would find more directly with that consciousness we call God. And in the name of the seminar, that was it Matt and David? Was it your idea for the name? Or a group of us, okay. It's a bunch of swamis or something like that, with turbans. Maybe something like that. So I've been doing some attuning. That would be a statement that goes in lots of dimensions. I just realized that as I said it. But attuning specifically with the focus that you called the traveler into. So you invited the traveler to be here this Tuesday evening. And so I've been observing it, and it's a call to the highest consciousness. So it's that call in me to the highest consciousness that is present with me, and I see that as a call to everyone's highest consciousness. And when we relate to that, then it becomes what we are referring to this evening as loving God. That is a way we would experience and attune to our highest nature, is by loving God. Those of you who have been familiar to some degree with the Judeo-Christian line of teachings, which I would say we have that certainly in this part of the world, in this culture, as a familiarity, and then that would be all kinds of degrees. Anybody here willing to declare you've read the Bible all the way through, word for word? See, there's some hands up tonight. In case you're wondering, do people really do that? At least there's some hands claiming that feat, and I think it is a feat of a sort, just to be willing to go who begot who, and then what happened, and then all kinds of storylines showed up. But what we're really getting into is the simplicity of it, and I consider this movement simplifies that process for us in the very highest way we can. One of our teachings is that we're never given anything we cannot handle. And let's just consider, well, what would happen if we couldn't handle it? Not that we do much of that, but let's just consider we would discontinue or terminate, or we would be no more. It would be over. So obviously, if you're present and awake, however you would determine that, then you're handling the requisites, you're handling what is required of you to be in the way of the masters. And I do consider that's where we are in the movement of spiritual inner awareness, is we're in the way of the masters. One of John Rogers' books is The Path to Mastership. How many of you have read that book? So it looks like most of you, by far, have read that. It is available if you haven't, and it's one of the many doors into what we do as a form of teaching and familiarizing ourselves with it. What we also endeavor to do is something we refer to as soul transcendence, so we're endeavoring that tonight, no matter who's here, who's present. So if we have God incarnate present, that God incarnate is also in the way of soul transcendence, that's a business of God. And maybe those words are unique if you're brand new to MSIA, but it is what we declare as our primary business, our focus, what we're attempting to experience and learn, however we do that. And it's something that is not new in any way other than everything's new, then it's new in every way. But it is something that has always been because it always is. That's another way of looking at it. But I want us all to be aware again that we're surrounded by the message that comes from the loving of God, and that and my way of experiencing how that works is that God moved first and doesn't stop moving ever. And then we learn, to become one with that movement, so that we are fully aware, fully awake in the love of God. And that's what we're here for, all of us, that there's no part of the creation that is unloved by God as the first movement. And then as we realize that, our life turns these keys, the keys that find the truth, the freedom. What was the first part of that? The opening door, the keys, okay. Well, there's another part that's somehow come around here at some point. That these teachings have always been, and even though we're in a place that we could consider has lots of troubles and disturbances that the world kind of specializes in, that they have a purpose, and the purpose more than anything is to love. That regardless of whatever is in your life, however you would term that, however you would define that for yourself, however you relate to it, it is about your loving. It's about opening up so that your loving becomes God's loving. And that's what we are doing in this movement. I'm not trying to claim anything like we discovered it, or we reinvented it or anything like that. We're just doing it as best we can. And so I encourage us tonight to be in that consciousness of loving that becomes not about any condition, that it doesn't matter what the conditions are, wherever you are. And I know some of you east of here, as far as you go, until you run into the Atlantic Ocean, that it's a bit cold where you are still. Regardless of how cold it is, how hot it is, anything that we're here to do the loving. It's also something that we relate to as a sound. So as we pick up on the vibration of love, it becomes something that we can hear in a very transcendental way, a way that moves us into our higher and higher nature. So that is our focus that we do in spiritual exercise, our way of referring to our worship, that we come into the sound of God, we come into calling in the name as best we can. And there are names in the various vibrations of God that we can experience as a consciousness who is of all the dimensions. So including this world and the worlds to come, that we're opening up to that. I invite you to, more than anything tonight, be attuned and open to the vibrations of Spirit as they're being made available to you in your way. For some of you, that may be that you just go out. And that's probably by now, if you're in the movement practicing, that's a familiar exercise. And we call it out of the body. We have lots of names for it. But it's really in the spirit, so that we're more conscious and available in the spirit. We find that our minds and our bodies as well don't necessarily know how to keep up with that. And that's okay. They were designed to be vehicles. And when we get that attunement going, there's nothing we're unable to love. And this is the path of the masters, that those who are amongst us, and it just takes one who is in our midst, who has that full authority, that full knowledge of God's love, that presence is what is in our midst and we call into the name. And that's been spoken of long ago, not just by our friend Jesus, but whoever has had the consciousness and the awareness to demonstrate first and then to also share what it is to be in this consciousness that is our true nature. Truth is the flame we must burn. Okay, we also have with us tonight Michael Hayes, and maybe some of you are meeting him for the first time. He's sitting over here. So he has his own attunement with this consciousness and with the Spirit, as we all do, and I'm going to probably call on him at various points as well, with whatever questions show up. So we have some from those of you who've gathered on the internet, and I'm going to shuffle the deck a bit here. See what comes up first. Looks like this one does. How can I tell when I'm listening to God, my heart, is it the same as listening to God, my ego, or the negative powers? Well, here's something that's going to cover that from now on. So there's an answer to this that is a complete answer, and it is that God issues all of creation, so there's no thing, there's nothing that you could ask about or wonder about. Is it something I'm to love? So then the answer is to do what God is already doing, and that would be to be in the loving of whatever it is. So that would include your heart, that would include your ego, your negative powers. I have negative powers? It's like, sure, that's one of the options of our creation. It's one of the opportunities all of us have, is we can do the negative. At some point, we realize the negative is not such a great choice. It's not the best choice available. So the consciousness of love is an expanding, uplifting consciousness. That's one of the ways we would know we're loving, is that in some way we have a positive regard. I think I'm getting Carl Rogers in here. Unconditional positive regard, is that from him? Okay, thank you. You know, that there are many ways to say what it is, but it's has its own authority, so that love doesn't need a witness. It doesn't need a demonstration. So when we join in the loving, it's something really beautiful. It's overcoming whatever would be the challenge or the issue. So if that's what you're bringing up, the things that are difficult for you, there's no difficulty that loving cannot overcome and resolve. So stay with the loving. That's always going to be an answer. Yeah, please.
When we took this form and became human, or appeared to become human, because in a way that we were just appearing to be this, when we're back with the Spirit, we realized we were never really this physical form. We were just kind of overshadowing it and learning through it. But when we take the form, there is a name that's unique for us, which is our own code or key back into God, and we can connect to it most readily through this part, through the third eye area back and through here. And that name is present in the inner form, the spiritual form of all of us. And if you're concerned about, is it something negative or your ego, whatever, those things cannot call this name. It can only be called through the Spirit of God. And so if we really want to know, and the only way to know whether it is of God and of the loving we serve, is we go within to connect to that place, and from that place the discernment is present. Because if that comes to us activates that and moves that, we know it's of Spirit. There's the consciousness that we work with in MSIA called the Traveler activates that for us and connects our conscious human awareness to that. And its purpose is all the time putting these things together, our human awareness and this spiritual truth that sits within us all. And so the Traveler then is the activator of that opportunity for us. Whether we take advantage of it or not is up to us. But if we will, if we pray and ask sincerely and devotedly towards it, it will be given to us, that ability to touch to this place that will always know that which is of God and of the Spirit. And so it is the great truth sayer within us all that can separate the chaff from the wheat, can help us to know that which has been given to us from on high, and that which would attempt to deceive us and pretend to be something of the Spirit. And it's active in every being. Every soul has it, the awareness in many people is dormant to it, so they don't make that connect. They're not activated. But if we're blessed to be activated to it, then we always have that capacity to know if we will take the time and be in the patience to let it speak to us.
Thank you, Michael. Our next question, looks like it's, there's a question here. Start out with the storyline. Recently I expressed probably the biggest amount of anger I have in my life. Well, that's noteworthy, isn't it? Depending on maybe how many years have passed. To my boyfriend, I realize it triggered an anger I want to let go of. How can I release or use this feeling for the highest good and without hurting myself or my love? Well, a great way to do that is to start out in thanks and thankfulness. And you can declare that. You can say, thank you. And even if that seems like an insincere statement, there's a part of us that is triggered, that has gratitude and understanding of the value of all things, including the anger, including whatever you would consider led to the anger, that perhaps in your view at least was something like an assault, a violation, a disappointment. I'm sure you could fill it in. And we all could whenever we've had some kind of an experience of what we call the anger. It's an upset. It's often a disillusionment, so that can be part of the thankfulness is you've just disillusioned me because whatever I was thinking or expecting would happen didn't. And if you look at anger, I just described, the dynamic. We have an expectation, we have an attachment to something that in our view, and sometimes it's just purely illusionary, that we make something up as a fantasy that's not real, and then something occurs to us in our mind, in our emotions, or our perceived reality that we consider is different from what we wanted or expected. And upset, anger is often the level that would show up in your awareness of how attached are you, to what degree are you demanding against what is. So the thankfulness is that someone or something is helping you to realize, where you're hung up, where your disturbance lies, where you carry it as a disease, as an upset. And these kinds of things can fester so that they do become heart attacks. I often just let the news sort of be on. So I'm, in my way, ministering to what is by just having a light going towards whatever it is that's coming on in the world. But today there was a story that was pointing out, I think again, that when we carry anger, it often shows up in the heart physically. So people do have heart attacks or heart disturbances in that area. It's not the only area. I mean, we can get it in how we digest things, how we eliminate things, how we mentally process things, so that there can be disturbance and disease in all these areas. So the thankfulness would include that somebody is helping you to understand you have disease. You have imbalance in an area. So they're your teacher. If they do it in such a way as you would characterize them as someone who has your button, they know exactly where to push at any given moment to release your disturbance, then they're a master teacher. And they're somebody that has great ability to release you if you're realizing that's what they're doing. And at some point you may also realize that I don't need your stimulation or the way you condition your life such that you trigger me or you trigger my disturbances. That's another opportunity, is to move on to something that's more harmonious, more peaceful, joyful, but always to understand that you're the master of your happiness. You're the master of your peace, your joy. And a key always to that is the loving of God. And I hear that many ways, but one way I hear it is, well, God can love this, whatever this is. So if I'm smart enough and open enough to request that and to allow that to come into my consciousness, then that in itself can solve it. That I would let God love it when I don't know how. That takes some openness, that takes some willingness to let God come in, and it's coming from within, from the deeper consciousness, so beyond what you may be aware of. It's called the unconscious levels. But God is present in the loving of what is needed to solve, to resolve, to bless, to heal. So always consider the loving that is needed as present, and then as much as you can, as much as you're willing, join in with God's loving, so that we or our witnesses to your expression would say, I can't tell the difference between God's loving and her loving. There's no difference. Anything? Okay. I'll just read this and we'll see where it goes. I would like to ask you, God, the Holy Spirit, John Roger, the Christ, the Preceptor, and the Traveler. It's quite a list. And sometimes just say God or Traveler. You know, that there are, like any one of us could answer to many names. I can't believe I'm hearing John Roger, that sometimes he would refer to me as Johnny Manure and shit for short. And gradually, I learned to love that. But I have to tell you, I didn't start out in a great amount of awareness that that was a term of endearment. So now that we got the attention of our higher consciousness by invoking it, the request is for healing, for grace and blessings that might be available to me to heal my heart, my memories, my relationship with John Roger and MSI on all levels, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, and all other subtle levels for the highest good. So one of the awarenesses I have for you, and whoever relates to this question, is it was answered before you had the awareness, before you mechanistically thought about it, heard the words, wrote the words down, did the mechanism of getting it here from wherever you are. That's something to realize it's always present, is the love solves all things, and it's the most powerful way we would relate to the presence of the divine, the presence of the master consciousness within us, is it's always loving in all ways. And it's okay to ask for help. I think it's actually required. And how it's going to work in this level that somebody told us, no woman is an island, and neither is a man. So none of us are allowed to be isolated. It's not permitted. We stay connected. So as we come to understand that whatever it would be that seems to be beyond our ability, you know, to heal, to clear, to balance, to be at peace, whatever appears as something we do not know how to do, that it is in our favor to be open to what is of our higher nature. And I'm saying that very deliberately. Our higher nature goes to God. Our higher nature comes from God. And there is no elseness in that. There is no real other. There's something that we would experience as a reaching out. And sometimes we experience that as humbleness. Sometimes it's humility. It might be something like embarrassing, awkward. There's a side to it that could appear as what we fear, what we dread, the last thing we would ever want to do, the last thing we would ever want to experience. And why would we be brought to such a development in our life or our existence? Like the worst thing I could imagine is happening, the thing I feared the most. And often that's how it plays out, eventually. And the more we can head that off, meaning that's an unnecessary form, to take it into a more extreme in the unnecessary, in what is negative. So part of it is having the wit to stop. If it's not working, if something is being experienced as I keep getting more out of balance, more upset, I'm in greater pain, I'm in greater suffering, stop. You get it? Like, that's enough. I don't need to continue this. When will this end? And the answer is with you. Are you ready? And I was watching this movie recently called Unbroken. So it's about the gentleman, his name's not quite coming to me, but in any case, it's a story of a man who did the 1936 Olympics, and then he became involved, I think, in the Army Air Corps in World War II, was a prisoner in Japan, etc. But eventually he became a minister, a man of God. On his way, he crash landed in the ocean somewhere in the Pacific, and he was in a raft with a couple other guys who survived the crash. And my interpretation was he made a deal with God. Something like, if you get me through this, I'm yours. You got me. However that happened, that something was opened up. Maybe in the first level, he'd say, well, he was so desperate, he was so hungry, he was in so much pain, and didn't want to die. Okay. Let's consider that these are all circumstances that work toward our greater good. So even the worst of it is a blessing. And when we do that, we're often open to experience our partner, our oneness with God, so that you can call it forward and be ready to be in the humility to transform. Like, I'll do anything. Like maybe you hear a little voice say, well, I was wondering when you'd realize that. It's about time, because that's what it takes. Get rid of your issue. Let it go. Let go of your rebuttal. Let go of your I can't, I won't. Your exception. That you're being called into joining it, not wanting to be somehow the best or the worst, because judgment can run both directions, so that we label us more than what we are, and we label ourselves less than what we are. In either way, we need to get with what we are and to come into oneness with that. And to be able to look around at the creation and understand I'm you and I'm you, and we are one together. That's part of what's going on in this world, is to come into that awareness that we cannot do it to another without doing it to ourselves, and doing it to God in the middle. So whoever we've done something to, we've done that to God. And whatever's been done to us by somebody else has been done to God. So we can't be separate from that consciousness, and to understand that it isn't something that creates a hierarchy of who's the better and who's the worse. There is no such thing. How could the love be complete with all the creation if there was something that was less than love? It needs to be something that we give completely to all of the creation.
When the question was asked about the person about suffering and loss, there's an interesting thing about why we suffer the loss of a loved one, and many people in this room have had a significant loss recently. And what happens inside of our consciousness is that we have a story which is tied to our sense of us, our sense of identity. And when we have that loss, it becomes an aberration within the story, which takes us away where the story which we so love and so lifts us now suddenly invokes in us suffering and pain. And reflexively, we want to change the story, or we want to forget the story, or shift either change the story or forget the story, somehow to create a disassociation away from the story. That can work, and many people do it, and that's how they heal things over a longer period of time. But it's possible to find the healing and find the balancing much faster if we can, instead of change the story, lift our awareness to understand that the story of our existence that we are holding to ourselves and telling ourselves is part of a greater story. And if we can see that story that we've become attached to in the context of a greater story that it is part of, we automatically, through that elevation, start to gain the context and the freedom. And we understand that the sense of finality that we've put upon our story is an illusion. It is just another shift, another variation in the story of greater purpose that we're part of. And that one we lost was part of, and that we continue on with that one we lost in the greater story. And then that greater story that continues on includes us both, and that way we have never really lost them. We've just changed the nature of the story, and that we can celebrate the story once again. Amen.
So the first part of this says, thank you for all the blessings in my life. I'm grateful. Just consider you're talking about your entire life. So just put the grateful on all of that. I ask if it's for the highest good and light and the love of God to clear a curse in my family of early death. Well, part of the cure would be stop calling it a curse. Okay? Consider, hey, we got an early call again. You know, Uncle Bob just got a call. He's with the Lord now. Reinterpret it. I know you're asking about some other things. Maybe it's about the way that it occurs, whatever disease, whatever ailment, circumstance. Sometimes it's sudden, violent. These things happen. But once we get in spirit, it's no longer about what went on in the world. Just consider, in the spirit, it comes into a nothingness. So the world isn't a reference point like even a memory. It comes into something where it's no more. Because it's not necessary. It's like clay that returns to its original form, whatever that form is. It's no longer shaped into a physical form. So that's part of it, and it's also, I see what you're seeing as the opportunity for you, for sure, but also for others that you know and care about to take better care, to consider that's what's going on. And you can do that so you change up the karma. There's a lot there. I could go on for quite a while. But let's just consider that once you start changing the vibration and you get out of the limitation that you stepped into by choice when you embodied. So just understand you stepped into your family seeing what would be best. So you took on whatever you have in the cell levels, whatever you have in your genetics. You did that as a wise choice in the spirit for what you would need to experience, what you would need to learn in this lifetime. That can often run as a series, like Saturday serials or something like that, where there's another episode, there's another lifetime, and the cast of characters reconvene. Because if you look at it, it's a good use of energy to get people who are familiar with each other karmically to re-establish that as a family, as a community, with variations in lots of different ways. When you come on to the blessings that we've talked about, as loving, caring, sharing, health, wealth, happiness, abundance, prosperity, riches, and touching, when you come onto those blessings in your life and engage them in full, you can change the karma. You can move it through grace and a grace field so that amazing things can happen. And just keep in mind, not all of them can happen in this world because this world has limitations. So at some point you're going to graduate. In the movement of spiritual inner awareness, we acknowledge that in full and plan on it. And plan on it in such a way as we do what we can here to store up the blessings and the treasures there so that you're going into your liberation from the karmic field that's in the world, and then being more specific in your family, with you, in your life form. It's really important that you change that attitude from curse. Just clear that. I understand that there are things that karmically from the law were placed, and not necessarily just by you, but by others, in something that would be intricated. I don't know, that's the word I'm hearing. I'm hearing it exactly as I'm pronouncing it. So it's intricate, detailed, but it's also something that you can have released. So you can pull the part that's yours out more and more. And the focus to love it, bless it, be thankful for it. These are all keys for you.
Every illness condition or every infirmity that we deal with, we can look at it from the point of view of illness, but we can also look at it as a point of opportunity. I've always been taught the idea that all these things that afflict us are our teachers. And so the important thing is to deal with a teacher called, what is it I'm to learn here? Why is this present? What does it have to teach me? And if I learn what it has to teach me, then I don't need it as my teacher, and it can go teach someone else. So it's always called, how do I turn this stumbling block into the stepping stone? Many times when people come in to the world with conditions like you're talking about in the family line, one of the primary lessons that the soul would be looking for when it would choose into that family line is to learn the lesson of immediacy, that the consciousness had a tendency to become distracted and focused away into the non-essential or the non-important or the non-purposeful to where that soul is in its progression. There's a saying in a poem I read many, many years ago, and it said, "For approaching death has turned me inside out." And it's the prospect of finality or of a conclusion to this adventure changes the way we do the adventure. It brings us much more immediate, much more present to what counts and what matters. Many people in their consciousness through time get lost in a distracted state. And so they'll choose into a pattern like this because it'll bring them back into the immediacy and the opportunity that's present. And so in that way, it's a great gift we could give ourselves to have that, because we're in a sense always being called to a kind of accountability about how we use this opportunity of life and how we use the energy we have and the time we have. And are we impeccable with it? There's a saying that there is no waste in spirit. And so the more we are going to live the spiritual life, the more we are free of the waste. We do not waste the opportunity. We do not waste our moments. And the greatest waste we can have is to spend time outside or disconnected from our loving. And so it's a reminder to us to love and to behold the preciousness and honor the preciousness of life that's presented to us constantly. Amen.
And for whoever wrote the question, I got the other part of it that's just in the light. I feel like a crown in my head from many months ago. Okay. I think this is being translated or maybe something like that. I feel like a crown in my head from many months ago. Can you tell me more about it? Well, I'd say that is accurate. So that what I'm looking at is it is in your head. That's one of the symbols of the higher nature, that there is a royalty in what we're doing. So we're going into what could be called the King of Kings, the Queen of Queens. We're going into the higher nature, the royal nature. And it's also something that is part of our spiritual inheritance, to be crowned, so that we have the authority, that there would be signs that we have the authority that are determined. Sometimes it's seen like as a royal robe. There's an adornment in the spirit as well. So then when we start seeing who we are in the higher nature, the higher dimensions, it's like, who is that? Wow. And we're really looking at some reflection or version of who we are in the higher nature. And that's part of the test, is can we be with that without feeling we're not worthy, or we would judge ourselves from what we have done in the lower nature, in the lower consciousness, that we would hang ourselves up as not qualified, as not clean enough, clear enough, royal enough, etc. When we see into the spirit, there's nothing outside of the perfection of God. So that would include all of the actions, all of the manifestations. What happens, as I referenced earlier, is that it dissolves. So it comes back into, if it's from a nothingness, like it was circumstantial, it was a condition, temporary in nature, well, that it's pulled up. So it is no more, and what appears is of the higher nature, the higher forms appear. And part of what we need to understand is that we're in an eternally, not just traveling, but expanding, going into higher consciousness nature. So even when we're crowned, that in one way of relating to that's just the first of many coronations, that we're taking on higher powers as well. But it's also a way of relating that you're receiving initiation. That's one of the ways that it would be related to you. And there are many initiations that we don't recognize. So within each level, there's movements. We call them light initiations. It's just a way of understanding there's progression. That progression is constant even when we have a fall. I just got led into saying, well, tell them about how that works. So even if we have a fall, that the soul is still progressing higher, so that the way is being prepared through greater experiences. So even the fall is contributing to the soul's progression. But you could look at the fall as an unnecessary form, like I wasn't watching what I was doing, I was careless, I was magnetized by something below, and then I kept looking at it until gravity got me, and now I was tumbling to a much lower level that I didn't need to go. It was an illusion, it was a mirage. It wasn't what I thought it was. I'm just giving you some of the storylines that may be familiar. What we're teaching is reducing the downtime, so that when you step into an authority, a designation of spirit, an anointing, that there's, to whom as much is given, there is expectation. It's not quite expectation, it's more, it's required. you need to uphold the integrity of what it is, the values. It's like you need to be in that nature to be in it. That's a more clear way of saying it, actually. So it's not about a quantifiable thing, that we would measure it of 95 on the scale and 94 drops. I mean, there's something to that, but it's much more about be truthful, be virtuous, be charitable, be compassionate. These are qualities that would uphold the higher nature.
This is just a little addendum to what John was saying there about the crowning. There's a stabilizing of the Christ consciousness in a number of souls that's been going on, and that's one of the ways it's seen spiritually, is a crowning. And the stabilizing mean that the consciousness has been tapping the Christ consciousness, but hasn't been able to create hadn't been able to hold with it in such a way that it can be reconnected and reaccessed, and that the person can't be used as an instrument of the Christ in its purpose fully. And so this crowning is often a recognition of the stabilization of the consciousness, that it can now be used by that higher force we call the Christ as an active part of the Christ's work in the world. It's before that time where the consciousness is in support of it, but it can't be used in the same way because it can't hold the force of it. So it's really in this particular case, it's a testament of the anchoring of that person's inner purpose in alignment with the purpose of Christ.
This one reads, I have a somewhat difficult decision to make. I'm asking for the light that I do what is God's will. In considering God's will, there is no other. So what that is, when you bring that up, there is no other. There would only be kind of like the illusion of something else. So that would be a hint too. So if things keep not working out, it feels like you're in Groundhog Day all over again. Or it's familiar cycles in all over again. That's a hint. Do something different. Open up into a new way. Be open to bringing in your wisdom, your grace, all these things. You go on to say, asking for assistance on how to learn and discern better what is spirits and gods and the traveler's inner lead for the highest good. It's important that you realize you're talking about yourself here. So God is your consciousness. You have God consciousness in you, indwelling. What you refer to as the Spirit. You have the whole Spirit in you. You have the traveler consciousness in you. So this is really your lead that you're looking for. And this is one of the illusions that come through the mind as a kind of a sense like, I can't do it, so I need something exterior to myself in order to do it. Instead of, no, it's just another part of myself. It's part of who I am. Well, how do we relate to a teacher or an inner master who is a guide or a way shower? How does that work? It's just a way of relating to a higher nature of who you are. And so, well, it works like it's an I-thou relationship. Okay. And where you are relating, that's practical. To call upon this nature, but also to understand what you're really looking for is your own leadership. That's what's being called in here, is to understand that your life is built in such a way that you can handle your choices Well, what am I talking about? I'm talking about your soul nature, your God nature. It has no real risk. So then what is all the worry about, or the consternation, or the indecision, or the confusion? What is it all about? These are things that the mind can do. So one of the ways to clarify things is to bring to the mind something that's real, something that's factual. We call it check it out in MSIA. So is it solid? Is it sure? You can make that into something that becomes an unnecessary indulgence. Like I haven't got out of kindergarten because I haven't finished checking everything out yet, and you're 92. It's like it's time for you to move on, take a risk and go to first grade. It's time now. So some people take it into a ridiculousness where they're hesitating, they're doubting as a form of existence. And then there's a feeling of I'm lost, I'm not connected. It's like because what's prepared for you, you're holding back from. And this is a form of missing out on the opportunity that's here for you to experience your life. So take risks. That's part of what would be helpful to you. What you relate to as risks, other people relate to as ordinary opportunities and choices. Okay. Please send light and blessings to me, my parents' graceful completions in this lifetime. That's wise, because often we have family karma and it can be potent. So we're all called in to come to peace, come to loving with our family. Maybe that's another form of coming to Jesus. We're having a coming to Jesus moment. So let's face it for what it is, and resolve also that you love your family such as they are. When you're in this line of the travelers progressing into finishing your karma, it's no surprise that the worst of your karma is brought in. The most extreme, the part of your karma that needs you to resolve it, to bless it, to heal it, to clear it. And sometimes that's called your family. Like, how did these people end up in my life? I can't believe I chose them at something. It's like, well, you did. But you can also move that to a choice that is a blessing because the way you relate to it. Would you please be my friend in Wayshore? I am. So that's not a move on my part. So it's your move. I love you and want to be closer to you. The place to do that with the traveler is inside. Well, can it also be outside? Yes, there's a traveler in the 10% level. I'm here. So let's consider you're still awake, maybe. And I'm talking with you. But the place that's going to be most valuable is inside you. And that my form and that would be recognizable to you can appear. Well, let's consider that the traveler is working with you in such a way that it will choose the form. Sometimes that's something for you to meet up with, that there are many ways, shapes, energies in which the traveler will reveal itself. When you chant your tone, it's a way to test the spirit. So test the nature, like, is this the traveler? Chant your tone from inside so that you hear it within. There are levels where you can hear it in the dimension. And that becomes what we refer to as the sound current, that you hear the sound. You also experience the light. It moves through all of our inner senses as a direct experience. How can I move through fears and resistance to seeing the beloved Master in myself and in others? Hey, that's a great question. That's my question too. Yeah, I want to know this answer. Let's consider that it's human and ordinary to have a dose of fears. Is there anybody here that says, I don't have any fear? Fear never touches my consciousness. See, I'd say you're in a delusion because it goes with the level. It goes with the negativity. It's a negative form that would contract us, make us shake or shiver, pull back, withhold, deny. These are things. Fear is one of the primary ways we would recognize the negative power. That it uses fear as something to diminish artificially. It can't really diminish anything. It doesn't have that power. So what does it do? It just makes things up. Often, in the forms of deception and what we call lying or cheating, trying to be less than what we are, or make somebody else or something else less than what it is. Doesn't really have that power, so that's an illusion. So just wake up and stop the illusion and look at things as they are. That would be something that would bring you into a greater relationship with your courage, with your wisdom, with your strengths, by facing what you fear. It doesn't have to be like everybody here has to wrestle a 14-foot crocodile as a way of confronting your fears. It's like, no, in some ways that might be foolish. But you might, look at a crocodile from over here, and there's a nice big thick glass wall between you and the crocodile, or something like that. The resistance is another form of something that I would call your unworthiness. That's your sense about yourself because of judgment. That you're still carrying a dose of judgment towards yourself about your past existence. So the cure is love yourself, forgive yourself, which is a way of saying take the forgiveness that is the Christ, that is God's blessing, and take it in. So you breathe in forgiveness. You breathe in a blessing toward whatever has occurred in your existence. Some of that may be revisiting in the form of images or something like memory or dreams that will help you move through what you need to experience inwardly to clear and heal the past actions. But it's much more not about the past actions, it's about how you relate to the past actions. Bless whatever it is, and then bless how you have had difficulty, struggled with whatever you've experienced in it's really your existence. So a lot of this is unconscious that you're looking at.
Just kind of adding on to what John was saying. To see the spiritual master or the master form of the teacher, other than when the teacher, through his grace or through his darshan, extends it to you, which means he does the work, and if you'll just open, you'll get it. But to see it in a regular way where you can, in a sense, open to the place where you can always have it and always know it, requires in our consciousness that we are freeing ourselves from the primary illusions that this whole human experience is about, which is the illusion of space and time. And the one that tends to open us to be able to see spiritually more than anything else is freeing ourselves from the illusions of space, meaning that we define ourselves as existing in a point of separate condition. We're not operating with the awareness that what we are is a consciousness. We're operating as if we are a thing, a self, and we have localization. For most people, it's a localization here as the center of identity or center of self-identification. But as we move spiritually and awaken spiritually, we can be freed from the illusion of ourselves as confined by space. And in that moment, the ability to know and perceive directly as consciousness comes to us. One of the reasons we will tend to have more experiences of the Master and the form of the Master through our dreams initially is because when we go into the dream state, we're freed of the illusion of ourselves confined to this. We are set free from the illusion of space that dominates us in the physical world. And so in our dream, we can have that direct perception of the teacher that we wouldn't necessarily get if we're just sitting here, because the barrier to us having it while we're sitting in here is we keep trying to have it through the point of reference of I'm here. But in truth, I'm not here. I'm everywhere that God is, and God is everywhere. And in the awareness of God, the Master is included, and so the awareness of the Master is present. It's a simplistic way of saying it, but it's something that is reachable and realizable for us. And much of the work that the Traveler Conscious is doing with us is constantly stretching us up against the boundary of our sense of stability, our sense of reality, our sense of us, and then pushing a little farther. And then when we shake, letting up, and we adjust to this being stretched into more and more living beyond this sense of ourselves in space, having this story of us, which is, of course, time. And it's like this stretching, pullback, and at some point we stretch beyond it, and we're on the other side of it, and when we have it sufficient, we live on the other side of it. The amazing thing is when we get to that experience of ourselves on the other side of it, we realize that was who we always were. And all the time we've always been aware there. But it's this ability to have the aware there connect to the aware here, and they become a simultaneous truth, where we're aware there while we maintain this experience here. And the great paradox of it is when that happens for us, this becomes clearly the illusion, and this becomes the effort. Whereas while we're down here caught in the illusion of this, that seems like such a monumental, impossible effort. And so everything reverses for us. And this is what the God consciousness beings have. And that's why when we're lucky enough to have the Master form that directly anchors that opportunity to us through that Traveler Consciousness, we're all the time being stretched like this. And it's going on all the time. And at one point we wake up, we realize it's always been done all the time, and in a way, we were the one on the other side doing it because we become one with the Master. And then the darshan the Master gave starts to be given through us as well. But we can't own it or claim it because we realize it's coming back to us through all the other Masters, even though they're asleep to their Mastership. Amen.
I'm going to do what I came here to do as a completion in the form of a blessing tonight. That sounded like almost felt like a finality, as I was listening to it. I was like, So it's for tonight and also to be continued. So the first awareness that I'm witnessing here is the loving of God is continuous, it's constant, it's also ever expansive. So it's calling upon each of us to realize we need to let go, because when we attempt to do it in our lesser nature, our human nature, we naturally encounter our limitations. They are present in our humanity, our ordinariness. So there's a blessing for us to realize by letting go, which is to relax, to actually move into an undoing. So if we're holding, sometimes that's physical, like if we're holding tension, we could let that go. We could be aware of the body physically so that we have the willingness to have more ease, less tension. We can always assist ourselves by being aware of the heart center, and I'm touching it right now. If you want to touch it, that's another opportunity, just to have sense awareness that in the body there's a center of the spiritual nature. When we breathe into that center. And the heart vibrates with that center. So we have two very powerful movements going on, the breathing movement and the heart movement that is bringing the life force, the spiritual nature into the body, which is also to illuminate the body and the body consciousness that we know as our psychic nature, the feelings, the thought field. It's also beyond our comprehension, beyond our perception. So there's a level of the psychic nature that is unconscious, but it's also illuminated. And when we come into that greater understanding and harmony with our psychic nature, we realize the greater powers in the unknown. But there's a great unknowing that we release as well. So we let the mind relax about knowing, understanding, perceiving, conceiving. So let that blessing come in. So the mind is released. And that can be also important as you're letting go inwardly, as an attitude of openness. Now let's be aware that the light is always with us. In the awareness of the light as a radiation. So you may see it, you may feel it as a sensation. There is a sensation of the light. Sometimes it's like tingling, it can be a warmth or cooling. It can be that sense of ease that comes in. The emotions can come into ease. The light harmonizes. So it knows how to let go of the barriers between the levels of consciousness, so that more and more the differences between the physical nature, the astral nature, the emotional nature, the mental nature, the unconscious nature, it more and more emerges as something you might experience like water, that you're immersed in the water, and that the water has a quality of substance that holds you and sustains you. So that it's a water that helps you be buoyant. It's also water that cleanses. So then you can experience that elements that are not of your pure nature are releasing. Sometimes that also becomes a tingling, a sense of vibration. You could feel this in parts of the body, from head to toe, the extremities. But it can also be internally, quality is soothing, nurturing. It becomes also a quality that is lighter and lighter, more expanded. And you go with this lighter nature. So you're floating or suspended. It also has this experience of expanding. So you become more. And in your awareness, you're reaching out. You may be more aware of light. That can be visual. It can also be light that has the qualities of understanding, light that has joy, laughter, peace. These are ways to experience the light. There's a sweetness in the quality. That as we encounter one another in the light, as we can see one another in this light, there's the quality of radiance. So everything is illumined. So whatever we see as a form is illumined in the light, and in the qualities of light that we know as colors and hues, tones. And as we open this awareness, we're also aware of the sounds that we hear that are of our higher nature. Some of you are experiencing, you could relate to it as you're above, way above. So it can kind of be strange that you're aware of your body, but you're also in a much greater awareness of who you are beyond the body. And you have the opportunity to look upon the inner master, the one who communicates God, communicates the loving of God. And as you move into this awareness, more and more you have the ability to see in all ways. In all the dimensions. In every direction. And this awareness is full of beauty, full of majesty, full of glory. This opportunity is always available through the Christ and the traveler consciousness. This is the consciousness of the whole spirit. This is the consciousness of your blessing and the loving of God. Beirish Beshan. Okay, thank you for the opportunity to be with you once again on Tuesday night. And I want to welcome you to partake more and more in what we're doing. I feel well, it's something like inept. I don't know if that's the word, but let's say unfamiliar, and there's so much more that is going on these days to make what we're doing more available. So I'm not really keeping up, but there are others who are very active as staff and volunteers, opening up the opportunities so that what we're doing tonight is obviously available online, and at some point it'll be archived. And so I'm telling Julie, yes, go ahead and archive it with whatever you need to do to make that available. And there are other ways through our seminary, through the workshops and the teachings that we're doing. If you really tried to do some kind of inventory of it, you would likely find yourself overwhelmed because it's not meant to be something you do in every way. There's far too much for any of us to do. And I think that's a good, amazing opportunity that we have here. So, partake, be involved. And the whole opportunity comes into knowing yourself as the love of God. Good night.